I'll tell you something that I've been wondering about recently is what is there going to be a storytelling that is post cinema? Is there already that? And what is it going to look like? And what I'm thinking, if we had the era of the printing press where the novel was the way we
Mm.
told stories, and then we had the era of the broadcast screen where the movie was the main way of storytelling, and now we've got the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah.
Is there something else?
Yeah, maybe there's something else. I don't think, I was thinking about this later, and I'm not sure if one thing replaces the other. I think you just keep going, because people are still reading books, and then people will still keep watching movies, and then television is a bit more, let's say, long form. It's a bit more like a Russian novel, which you could digest over time. Than a short story. A movie is a bit more like a short story, right? It's a compressed sort of universe. And I think, well, most creativity is moved to TV these days. TV has its advantages and disadvantages too, because it's not as communal maybe as a movie. It's like a movie is like a Joker movie comes out and everybody goes to see it, and and then there's these TV shows that people kind of watch in a serial way. But I think with Netflix and all that, maybe this sort of it's less of an event. Maybe if a TV series is less of an event as a movie, so maybe movies will remain as this kind of event, and most of them being pretty mediocre, and then one comes up like Joker and everybody goes to see it, and then well, I guess television is perhaps a bit more sophisticated than movies these days, and it takes place also within your in your living room, instead of you go to this movie house, which is sort of like a quasi temple. Can you riff off anything I've said there? Is anything I'm saying landing or?
I'll tell you where something is wanting me to go now is to just on the topic of TV. Like, have you seen Black Mirror, and what do you think of it?
Sure, I have. Yeah, it's Black Mirror is cutting edge TV. It's dark, cutting edge, extremely dystopian TV, and yeah, I think it's legitimate. I think it's a legitimate expression of neurosis in the internet age or something like that. Because I would hope that also that, again, it's very nihilistic and dark, and so I hope that there's some. I hope that we can, and there's a lot of this dystopian darkness in popular culture at the moment, and I do think that's legitimate. I think that's something we need to look at, but I also think we need positive grand narratives again. This is what I talk about a lot with Alexander Bard, and his whole idea is to construct a new grand narratives, because of what we talked about before, because of the need of a constructive principle, right? Rather than just getting lost in doom and gloom and waiting for the end of the world.
Is there, do you think, anything that separates these new grand narratives from old grand narratives? Perhaps like a dispelling of naivety.
Yeah, that's important.
By postmodernism.
Yeah. Well, John Vervaeke has a phrase, and I write and think a lot about John Vervaeke's work these days. What was it? Pseudo-religious ideologies. We want to avoid pseudo-religious ideologies, because pseudo-religious ideologies are incomplete and dangerous. And we have enough evidence of that, I think, in the 20th century to know that's true. And this is kind of an untrendy thing to say, but I think there has to be actually a religious quality to. I think religion has to come back online again, but not in let's say the what Vervaeke calls the Iron Age hierarchies, not in that sense, but in the sense of, let's say, primordial religion, which is very, very, very old and very, very deep and very, very, it's like that has to come back online in some level. So I think the grand narratives. I think a grand narrative, by definition, has a religious quality to it. Maybe it has an ideological quality to it, but not a constructive one. Not a destructive or deconstructive one, right? Because when we're talking about all this, like when you're talking about Black Mirror and Joker and all these are very deconstructive. The dystopian vision is deconstructive, and we're still in postmodernism here, and we're trying to find what's after postmodernism. I think is what's the grand narrative going to be. So it could be a lot of things. It could be Bard says ecotopia, right? Creating a sustainable world. He prefers that to let's say environmentalism, because environmentalism is just another sort of it's still a game, right? But maybe ecotopianism would be a constructive sort of game. That's one of his ideas, which I've been playing around with and thinking about. Because it's easy to say, okay, we don't want to be utopian anymore. We don't want to be naive. We don't want to, but at the same time, you always have to have, let's say, a vision of the promised land, right? I'm using religious language, and not from a Christian point of view or anything like that. I'm just saying that these things are true, and they're in just from the point of view of archetypal truths, as you need to have a vision of the promised land.
I was thinking
somewhere you're going some direction. So this is a lot of what worries me in the whole environmental movement is this doom and gloom, getting lost in this doom and gloom dystopia, and rather than saying, okay, let's construct something, let's construct something again, let's construct something beautiful.
Well, right, I was arguing with my sister last night about this, and she was saying, well, if the world collapses and we all die, then we deserve it because we've done it to ourselves. I was saying, I mean, like, I get your point, but there's something that feels to me almost like self-effacing in that. And then also, like,
sorry to interrupt, but that really, like, my primary school teacher, sends this message to my daughter, that she's 10 years old, my daughter, that, mankind is evil, So what kind of message is that to plant into the young growing soul of a 10-year-old who loves animals and nature, and human beings are evil. Okay, human beings are a cancer on the earth. Human beings are, this is the often the common environmental message, and I say, okay, yes, human beings, we've struggled, we've done bad things, we can be demonic and terrible, but we also need to also have a constructive, a constructive message that in any circumstances you can do something, in any circumstances, and our circumstances in the developed world are, most of our problems are more to do with narcissism and obesity than they are to do with privation and hunger, right? That's what we're dealing with. So we have all this power and potential, so that's why I'm thinking a lot and writing with thinking about John Vervaeke's work as in the way out of this meaning crisis, because all of these dystopian films and dystopian visions are expressions of a meaning crisis.
Yeah, it is very present, that sense of humanity as evil. That I do see it as self-hating projected outwards onto everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was saying to my sister as well, she was saying, look, there's just so many things to do and we need to do it and we're not doing it. And I said, well, if it was that easy, if it was just as easy as doing it, then we would do it. It's not like, I think, the world is filled with people who actually want to cause environmental catastrophe.
Yeah.
It's just the systems have reached a point of complexity that we have very little control over them, and they are kind of in this snowballing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
well, how much control and agency do we really have in our lives? I mean, yeah. And what can we do? You know, Gurdjieff said, you know, man machine, we're very mechanical, right? We're just stuck in this we're stuck in this sort of program, this machine. And again, I think it's just attention. Every little drop of consciousness and attention is what sort of, you know, sort of breaks us out of this machine-like reality into a more living world.
yeah, I think there's also in the environmental movement this kind of false dualism between man and nature. Mm-hmm. And then as a result of it, this like man is evil and nature is beautiful and good. And so you get these beautiful David Attenborough documentaries, which are wonderful, but they do present the natural world as this, it's like the Garden of Eden that we have destroyed.
Yeah.
That is the underlying mythology, I think, in a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So again, we're stuck in Christianity and we're stuck in the guilt that comes along with it. Because
we're stuck in dualism. Yeah. We're stuck in the, you know, good and bad, good and evil. We're stuck in a shallow morality about how things are. Mm-hmm. And yeah. So and a romanticism about, you know, so, you know, I think that the Joni Mitchell says that he's like, we have to get back to the garden. That's kind of the hippie ethos, right? It's like civilization is evil and all that we've created is evil, and we have to get back to somewhere, and that place would be an ideal place, right? And actually, I think the garden is always present, and you know, and you know, the machine is always present, or let's say the dark aspect of our nature, and all those things they're both present simultaneously, and it's not about getting back to it's aligning ourselves with what is most meaningful and valuable and real, rather than let's say, this, I guess it's just you have to have a you can choose between, you know, self-loathing and actually, you know, choosing to fall in love with reality as it is all the time. I mean, you know, whatever is the fuck is happening is somewhat wondrous and amazing, you know, so, and painful as well and horrible, but, you know, am I making any sense here?
Yeah,
I'm a lateral thinker. I'm not good at following a clear line of thought. I tend to go out in many directions. So I hope that hasn't been too.
Me too. It's all associations. And
yeah, exactly.
I mean, so what I was thinking there is again about this idea of back to the garden, and you know, a garden is not a forest. A garden is sculpted by man. Mm-hmm. Even the word paradise originally means walled garden.
Yeah.
Talk about a garden of paradise. It is nature as crafted quite specifically by a higher conscious intention. Mm-hmm. And so this idea that nature as it is in itself is a garden is wrong.
Yeah. 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 And nature doesn't have good and evil. It doesn't have any boundaries. And human beings, again, it's back to art. We're art making creatures. We decide like the water is going to go in this direction. We don't make the water, right? It's not like we're constructing nature. like a part of what you were saying, I was like, okay, we're in control. No, it's a balance between order and chaos, and that's the right kind of garden is not a enclosed system at all. It's very permeable, and it lets in what's already here, what's already been created, and and you work with that with delicacy and intelligence, and sometimes brute force, whatever all of the tools that you have, again, to try to create something that reflects, again, using a religious, unfashionable religious term, something that reflects the divine, I would say.
I think that idea of religion connects to a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of intimacy and like civilization in perpetuity and even parenthood. I'm thinking about when people talk about perhaps the genesis of religions. I think Peterson has talked about this being the tribes, and then you've got the father and the mother, and then the father of the father and the mother of the mother. And if you take that abstraction back, then eventually you get to the original father and the original mother. And so if we're following that line of the genesis of religion, then built into it is this idea of parenting and of handing on the knowledge and the world from one generation to the next.
Oh, that's so cool that you brought that up, actually, because I have a son. He was born like November 3rd, so he's 3 weeks old. I also have a daughter who's 10, and I was just having a conversation a little bit. I was just listening to Jordan Hall talk about parenthood, and I wanted to talk to him about that. I wanted to get his opinion on what is Plan B parenting, or sorry, I keep saying Plan B, Game B parenting, or what is what does parenting mean in the world to come, or the future world, or the world that's not there, is like and yeah, so that it's very interesting. That it's funny how you're asking me all these questions that I'm already that it's already going through my mind at the same time. So there's this synchronistic sort of quality to when you said parenting and talked about parenting. Do you want to go a little bit further and about that, talk about what you mean?
Yeah, so let me see what can roll off my tongue here. Well, okay, well, something I've been thinking about as well in terms of fatherhood in particular is the sense that I think fatherhood is a much later evolutionary phenomenon than motherhood. A mammal male can fuck a female and then go about his way. And in theory, the woman's got to go through the pregnancy and then is invested in raising the child, where when in the animal world, the male can just go off and do its thing. And it was something that happened in human development, where we developed this, I don't know, it's not like psychotechnology, you could call it like a social technology of guys sticking around to be invested in raising the young. And that enables a different kind of useful development. And then that idea perhaps of fatherhood gets abstracted into something like the divine masculine, which has to be embodied by men, and each man has to learn to come to this relationship with it, or else he remains a boy. And part of that is because it's less integral in the human experience perhaps than motherhood is. And that's not to say that women don't grow from being little girls to being women, but I think certainly there's more boys who don't become men than there are women or girls who don't become women. Perhaps. I'm really rambling here. I'm just thinking out loud. Is there anything in that seems
Well, what I'm kind of hearing is something about the sort of tragedy of selection or something. The fact that a lot of guys just really don't have the chance to, or don't step up to that experience to become, have a full life. A lot of guys get, killed in war, or, stuck behind their computer screens playing video games, and kind of just sort of, I noticed that in the society today, that men have a harder time finding a place. Guys have a harder time finding a place in this world, and I think that because the world has become so domesticated, right? And and in the past, there's been a very clear role for there were very clear roles for what men do and what women do. In fact, like I think before 1920, even the tools in a farm would all be gendered. Everything would be gendered. Men do this and women do this, right? It's very clear. And now you get a bunch of men and women together in an office, and the roles are less clear, and there's all this sort of flirtations and games that go on, and I'm involved in men's groups, and I think men's groups are incredibly important. I think women's groups are equally important, but I think men's groups are less obvious. Like it's much more. It's an intentional act for a bunch of guys to get together and talk about things that matter and work on stuff together. Men tend to get very isolated in this culture. Men tend to isolate themselves, and so they have a choice between a sort of cliche masculine role, which is kind of looked down upon, like, or they play an in between role, an androgynous game, And I think a lot of guys these days are sort of just don't know what to do. They don't have. Again, we're back to the Joker movie again, because the Joker has no father, right? In the sense he has no model for life that's masculine and that's positive. Okay. So he has no positive model for brotherhood with other guys. And that's so important. And it's devalued. Brotherhood with other men is the most beautiful thing. And it mostly in the postmodern culture, people make fun of that or something, or consider it to be look down upon that, I find. So that's yeah. And I've seen that in so many men kind of get lost and isolated and have a hard time with relationships so again, I think and I think the Joker is the perfect movie to show what happens to men when masculinity, manhood, a positive male principle is not present in society. It's either considered a kind of violence, a kind of toxicity, or it's just not important. It has no importance. Masculinity has no importance. It doesn't matter if you have a dick or a pussy, or it makes no difference. So I think I was talking. I did a podcast with another guy about this, and he was saying it's like maybe one of the things we need to do these days is just ask this question: what does it mean to be a man exactly, precisely, and not with any kind of answer, not with any kind of ready-made answer of what that is, whether it be macho or a much chauvinistic vision of that, or but I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think I listened to that podcast you did. It was with the Danish guy. Yeah. I like the way he spoke about it again, like discovering what it means to be a man without that ever being something that can be truly articulated. It's
right, exactly.
It's an experience. And you guys were speaking about Heidegger in the sense of it. I'm thinking that you were saying about just like it progressively reveals deeper and deeper levels of understanding of what that might be to be a man.
Mm-hmm.
And here I'm trying to bring it back to my own experience. I felt like just through doing the podcast and being involved with some of the networks we're in, it has gave me much more of a sense of what it is to be a man, because I'm actually having conversations with much more older dudes who think about this stuff a lot. As you said, it's not just being around the peer group, which I think is one of the big weird artificial things that our society does, is stratify people to these age groups within a year of one
indeed.
another.
Yeah.
And then that is your model for what social life is growing up, and you break out of it a bit. You know, I made friends who are a bit older than me when I was a teenager, and I think I actually learned some good things from them. But then now in my 20s, I mean, I guess you have a few bosses and people up again down in hierarchies, but there's still, I think we're conditioned unconsciously into being like, I spend time around people my own age.
Yeah, that's an issue. Age is an issue. Yeah. And also I spend time with in always in mixed gender situations. There's always women around, you know, and that's not true of traditional modes, right? But it's kind of true of postmodern modes. Is that you're always in a mixed gender situation, and so you lose the polarity, and you lose the spark between the genders. You know, because there has to be a polarity for there to be a spark, right? For there to be a creative process going on. So I think I'm not advocating any kind of like controlled gender separation or anything, but I think that it's good to find times where you get together with your male friends, and also for the women to get together with their women friends and build brotherhood and sisterhood. I think that's very powerful, and I think that's missing from the current cultural paradigm as an activity which is valorized. It just happens sometimes spontaneously, but it's not a valorized activity, and in fact people kind of think of it as old-fashioned. Or but the thing is, when you get together, what I've noticed in men's group is when you get a bunch of men together, they're not competitive with each other at all. They're not afraid to be vulnerable, and they can be very straightforward and you know, compassionate and helpful to each other, and that sort of thing, in a way that's a little bit different than if it was just if there were women around, right? In a way that's a little bit more there's no sexuality in the air, right? So there's no when if men and women are together, men are always trying to impress women, and women are, you know, trying to, you know, there's a game happening which is about seduction, and you need to step out of this game of seduction sometimes, and you know, get out of that game for a while, and that's the use of men's groups. And one of the problems with Joker is just lives with his mother, you know, so he's I guess he has a job, and he goes to, and then he goes to work, and he's bullied by these, you know. So we have, what do we have? We have either his maternal world, which he can't break out of, or you have these violent men, and or these like bullying, brutish types of men. But I think masculinity is something very deep and very nuanced, and very that you can cultivate, and so that's what I've been, that's been my experience in these things, and my experience comes from, let's say, having coming from a divorced family, and having you know, growing up with my mother. And in the 90s, I think I had no notion of this at all, of a gender in any way. And I had long hair down to here. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I almost identified more with the female world than with the male world, you know, which is interesting as well, right? But then later in my life, it's become necessary for me to consider what actually, you know, malehood and brotherhood, and what that means. What about you?
Yeah, I feel, interestingly, like also I have existed somewhat in feminine space, and I've almost had to rediscover masculinity,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which has been a very joyous thing, actually.
Yeah.
Um, Again, like my parents separated, and then I lived with my mum for a while.
There you go.
But then, you know, what I'm thinking here now is actually there is something about, you know, Alexander talks about the gender ambiguous shamanic type to a
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
artsy and philosophical, and who exists to go between those two worlds. And
I
when
love
he's
that as well. I love that. I think that's fantastic. The in between people. Yeah.
and I think that really does help me make sense of how I've always felt like, in some sense, I have one foot in the guy's world, but then in another sense, I've felt more connected, say to people and to animals than to analytical, technical things, and
Mm-hmm.
to deep conversation about feelings and people than, I suppose,
Mm.
more what you might think of as masculine conversation. But as I said, rediscovering masculinity and being like, okay, this is a cool thing to do, and to sometimes walk around and feel like there's a bit of swagger and like I want to go and tell
Yeah.
something to get out of my way, is actually feels good. And it's not destructive, it's not being Joker, it's not like I want to destroy,
Yeah.
but it's like I am a force.
It's a positive, like cutting through notion, right? I was thinking about it this in terms of circling. Do you know Gay Sindak's circling thing?
Mm.
There's this idea of circling, and circling is a beautiful idea for you know, dialogue and conversation. I like it a lot. But my question was, okay, are you just going to be circling around something forever? And when do you have the line also in the circle? I think circling is very matriarchal. It's very maternal. It's like you circle around an idea and then I guess, and then you get some clarity, and that clarity is the cutting through masculine principle. So if you're circling forever, um, within the feminine, there has to be this counterbalance of the vertical or the line to cut through that. Uh, um, does that make any sense?
Yeah, so what I'm thinking, I was listening the other day to a talk by, I don't know how to pronounce it, David Dada, but who wrote The Way of the Superior Man.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I found very interesting, he was talking about the difference between masculine and feminine ecstasy. And so he says masculine ecstasy feels like the liberation from constraints, from boundaries, which is why men love doing things like playing games or playing chess, or indeed going out into danger, because danger is a boundary, it's a threat, but if you can transcend it, then you get that exhilaration of liberation from that. Whereas the feminine ecstasy is much more about the fullness and the surrender to the richness and diversity of experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I watch my wife with my daughter, you know, and it's with a young infant, and the amount of attention that requires, the amount of sort of patience and dedication is like, it's no wonder that people worship the Madonna and Child. It's like it's such an incredible thing to behold, right? Um, and and I don't feel suited for that on some level, right? You know, especially I think in the first year, I'm awkward in that place in a way, right? So I need to help as best I can. But there is a way in which that's her realm, and I'm the helper from a bit outside, and that's what seems to happen. Um, and but I think that and I notice also that this is a pure sort of domestic space, and then I have to kind of go out and say, we're going to do this, or, you know, we're going to do that, right? If I just remain within the domestic space, being the little helper, you know, it's awkward. So I have to say, okay, we're going to go do that. We're going to go move towards, we have to do this. We have to, you know, and I think that's a sort of male female balance, is the man goes sort of outside and the woman keeps the inside. There's the sacred inside, and then there's the pushing boundary outside. Yeah. And again, when we're talking about these things, we don't want to talk about them in some kind of like, this is the way it should be or anything, or there should be some rigid archetype that describes this experience, because you know, there's endless diversity of possibilities of how these things could happen. There's just there are some sort of basic, deep biological realities to who we are, which are involved in this very male female thing. And I think that's almost the deepest thing you could study, right? There's almost nothing more deep than studying male, and, you know, studying the male female dance dynamic, you know, not just dance, war dance, the whole, that's the template for everything on some level, which makes us human, or not makes us human, makes us, or that's the template for, like, what I think the full idea of what I'm saying is like, the most intimate thing is the most important thing to work on, or to discover, or to build on. And if you don't have that, then you have this Joker world, which is totally an absurdism. You know, everything is absurd. Politics is absurd. Society is absurd. You know, families are absurd, purely negative, postmodern sort of flatland with no depth. And
well, that's another thought that certainly I had the experience at points growing up, like, yes, families are absurd. And it was because of coming through quite a nasty separation that had many, many years leading up to it. You know, it's essentially like my parents didn't really have much of a relationship at all. And so then I would just be like, oh, family is this stupid thing we have to do, and like hang around with people I don't like. And then now I'm thinking again about civilization in perpetuity. Like, if you don't have that model for family, for intimacy with others who were there before you and who will theoretically be there after you, then what is left but absurdity? There isn't connection to this kind of
family is, in a way, family is everything. It's just, you know, I know they always say that in the mafia or something, it's just family, but I don't mean it in that sense. I mean, yeah, I don't know if I have it. I can say more than that. Just that, you know, even the word family is very beautiful, right? It's like, family is everything, and family and everything grows from this family structure.
And you can go Freudian on it, because you can think that family is the birth of that experience of desire.
Yeah. Well, maybe not family in the sense of the nuclear family. Maybe the nuclear family is a bit problematic. That's a complex discussion. I don't know if I have a handle on what you could say about that. But I don't merely mean the nuclear family. I think the nuclear family is in the way the end of families or something. The end of the big family. I'm thinking of the big family, right? Like the familia or something. Like, I don't know if that's an Italian word, but
like the clan, or the even small tribe who are all invested in each other.
Yeah. Well, there's also levels of family. There's your blood family, and then there's your spiritual family, and your tribal family, and there's families nested within families. And Alexander talks about tribal mapping a lot. He talks about, and this whole Dunbar number. This has been talked to. A lot of people are talking about that. Is that actually everybody has a role somewhere, and that there is maybe a template. We don't know what it is actually, but everybody has a kind of a role somewhere. And happiness is not. I kind of disagree with Jordan Peterson in the sense of, happiness is becoming the individual. No, I don't think that's right. I think happiness is finding your place within the community, within the correct community, right? The Sangha in Buddhist terms, or the right living community. That's actually when you become fulfilled and your life sort of becomes very meaningful. Is when you find that. And actually we don't really have that. I mean, on some level, some people have it more than others, but that's why we suffer a lot, I would say. I say we suffer, but I mean, that's why there's so much suffering, is because we're kind of on the road back to discovering who we already are.
Yeah, I think you're totally right about just individual. Well, I think Alexander is fond of pointing out that it's just a myth and it doesn't even really exist.
Yeah.
Again, it just comes back to this idea of religion being that thing that we practice in order to get beyond that experience of self and into an intimate contact with that which is beyond both spatially and temporally, backwards and forwards.
Mm-hmm.
Even like individuals, the fact that I'm sitting here right now and able to talk is because I ate some food this morning, and so I'm not starving and unable to think, and the food came from somewhere else and I didn't grow it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all these layers of depth built up on top of each other, and to claim that I am an individual totally responsible for myself is
also,
to
you're an
a degree of control.
Yeah. Gurdjieff says that man is legion. So we think that we're one self, but actually we're many, many, many sub personalities. And often they're in conflict with each other. Sometimes they're in harmony with each other. And also what we are right now might be our individual expression right now. Might be something different in 5 minutes, or I'm certainly a different person than I was last year, and and a wildly different being than I was when I was your age, or in my 20s, so there is no fixed static individual by any means, and we have many individuals, I guess the word is dividual. that's the what's his name, this French theorist, Deleuze's expression. That we're individuals. We're not exactly individuals. We're more like individuals. Like we're more like a legion of potential beings.
But we want something eternal to cling on to, be it the God in the sky or the idea of the individual, or even just the sense of the hero or being good, or the ideology for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's again, we're back to this dialectic between matriarchal and paternal. Mm-hmm. The point that is focused on and the circling around.
Mm-hmm.
You lose the circling and it's just rigid, narrow totalitarianism.
Yeah.
But you lose that and you just have the circle, and you just have the postmodern graveyard of narcissism.
Yeah, just cycles and cycles and cycles, and no sort of upward movement. Yeah, exactly. So this is that's what I like about Alexander's. We need the matriarchal and the patriarchal. They're both. We need the mother and the father lineage, and we need to kind of. I think we need to rediscover those and also honor those and sort of bow down before that that rich, that rich, incredible rich, you know, what's behind us, in some sense.
Andrew, I think that might be a nice place to wrap up, you know.
I was just thinking, like, my brain is kind of like just a bit fried at this point, and I was like, that I'm kind of losing it a bit, losing the thread. So you noticed that as well.
I think I'm feeling the same thing. I'm feeling philosophied out.